Hi, Chris. It's kind of a little bit of a special episode. There's nothing too special about the Six Scale Scavengers episode 6, but Chris, this is the the day that we're recording here. If this is the thing, it's my 1 year anniversary of collecting hot toys, having my first hot toy in hand. So I felt, hey, what better day than any to schedule a podcast for you and I to get together and chat about some Marvel and Star Wars hot toys here.
Yeah, man. Congratulations. I guess is in order. I don't know if anniversaries in collecting are a thing, but hey, we'll go with it.
Hey, you know what? I needed a cold intro, and that seemed like better than anything. So, we'll go over our normal. If you've been a loyal listener, thank you. Chris and I appreciate it. We love the feedback, the Facebook group, the private Facebook group, Six Scale Scavengers. I think we're up to 20 members now, and some pretty good chat in there. If you want to get in there and be able to ask questions with Chris and myself or any of the other great collectors that we've already been able to come into our little private community, you definitely do so. The invite's there. But if you're a new listener, welcome. As I said, we're here to talk about Star Wars and Marvel hot toys. Chris and I, we don't pretend to be experts. I've only been collecting now a year, as I just mentioned, and we're doing this for fun. I mean, we would be having these conversations anyways. And like we usually say, and I try to say it at least once per episode, like that we're not experts, and we're just learning. We're constantly learning. We're making I don't know, sir. I never really want to refer to them as mistakes, but learning opportunities, further fine tuning. We'll talk about some of that in a little bit. Our show, this episode, we'll cover some news. We had just had New York Comic Con and kind of a dud for Hot Toys news there, but we'll still talk about what we've got coming up. We've got a topic to cover, as we usually try to, our collecting update, and our feature figure of the episode will be the Shore Trooper from Star Wars Rogue One, MMS 389. And there's a cool little story that goes with that. I may have mentioned it on an earlier episode, but we'll get into that. So, Chris, not only did we just have New York Comic Con, Star Wars fans, which you and I both are, we just covered some of the new episodes of Star Wars Resistance. It has nothing to do with Hot Toys whatsoever, but anytime we get new Star Wars content, I think it's noteworthy. We just covered it. I just covered it with Robin Vogt and Scott Inch over on the Brick City Blockade podcast network, which we are a part of. Broke down the first episode there. So, Chris, what'd you think of it?
Yeah, I got to check it out today, and I was pleasantly surprised. I wasn't sure how I was going to react to the animation, but I actually really like it. It's just fresh, it's different, and then I liked what you guys were saying about the level of detail and the ships and everything. It's just amazing what Lucasfilm can do with their animation, and I really like it. And the fact that some of the actors from the movies are involved, and hopefully that happens going forward. So yeah, I'm curious to see what's to come. I know we wouldn't see anything from this in Hot Toys form, but I just wanted to bring up like just the fact that we're getting more Star Wars content. It's a good thing. And then also we got some news about the Mandalorian TV show from Jon Favreau. And I kind of want to bring up the point that might be a possibility of some Hot Toys being brought out for that show. So it's always nice to see more content. So yeah, check it out on Disney.
Absolutely. And speaking of other new content, switching gears completely into the other fandom that we know and love with the Marvel Cinematic Universe. I know a lot of people are buzzing right now about Venom being out. I think you and I are kind of cautiously optimistic about it. I'm probably not going to see it in theaters. I'm kind of an MCU zombie. But speaking of MCU, the digital release dropped in between this episode and our last episode for Ant-Man and the Wasp. Had a chance to watch that again. I only got the chance to see that once in the theater, and again, it's just a solid movie. It's a lot funnier, I feel like, than the first Ant-Man, and it just works.
I love Ant-Man. I love the Wasp. I like both those characters a lot, and Yeah, I was excited to get it. I downloaded it. I'll be I'll be trying to convince the wife to watch it with me. But it's great. I got both those figures on pre-order. Those were both got those right off the bat once they came available, and looking forward to those. More Marvel content. I mean, we're not getting any more movies until March, so
Captain Marvel,
I
day
know.
one pre-order, baby.
I know. We'll see when and if that gets announced over the next few months. So, what else is going on?
So let's switch over and switch gears to news. And I'm completely stoked to talk about this. He was number one on my wish list in our last episode, and I was cheating. I honestly didn't think we were going to see this figure announced and released before the end of this year. But Luke Skywalker crate from Star Wars The Last Jedi, we got the pre-order. I think it dropped, was it Thursday or Friday last week? And or maybe it was Thursday, and then it finally went up for pre-order on the Sideshow website on Friday.
Right.
MMS 507, so it's actually going to come right before Leia Bespin that we talked about last time. Looking like the release date of this is between October and December 2019, retailing for $235. Fairly basic figure in terms of accessories and stuff, but I know that some collectors, I think we're fighting a couple different things here, Chris. I think number one, and it's been talked at length, we're not here to be movie critics or anything. We all like different aspects of these fandoms that we do. Some people love The Last Jedi. Some people don't like it at all. Some people say it ruined fandom. Some say it's the best Star Wars movie made. I mean, the fact that it's so divisive, I think, speaks a lot to I think a lot of the chances and risks they took, but I don't care regardless, Chris. Luke Skywalker is my boy. We've talked about it multiple times before. I personally love The Last Jedi, and I would get this figure anyways because it's Luke frickin' Skywalker. And even if you didn't like The Last Jedi and you like Luke Skywalker, this version of Luke Skywalker is like the ultimate version that you would have expected him to be at this age in the universe. And, you know, it's his force projection on crate. Spoiler alert if you haven't seen the movie. And it's like the perfect embodiment of what he would be as a Jedi Master at that point. And he's not all grizzly and on Exile on Octu. And I love this figure. I can't wait. And that's it. I just can't wait.
Yeah, it's a great looking figure. They executed it pretty well. I can't see too much wrong with it. You know, I'm a huge Luke Skywalker fan too, but I can't go that way right now with my collecting. But yeah, man, I'm excited for you. I know you've been buzzing about this for a while now. So
almost about a week now as the time of recording here. But yeah, you know, I did mention it's not terribly light on accessories. It's a little bit more than kind of like the standard release that's been kind of lately. It's in the standard ones have been going for 220, 228. I know Leia Bespin was a little less, but she doesn't come with any accessories. It comes with a Skywalker lightsaber. It comes with his cloak and hood, the ignited blade, the motion blade, which looks pretty cool. The stand that actually looks like it's the salt plains on crate looks really cool. I think the underrated thing about this is it includes the Han Solo dice, and just saw that most recently. Appeared in 2 movies in a row with The Last Jedi, and then obviously made a prominent place in Solo, a Star Wars story. So, I mean, yeah, I'm just, it definitely was a pre-order, day one pre-order for me. I was in angst a lot on that Thursday, wondering when they were going to put up. I kept checking between 3 and 5 p.m. Eastern time on that Thursday. And finally, it went up on Friday, got it in there. I was able to cash in quite a few of the reward points that I had built up. So not only am I getting a figure I've wanted for a while, ever since they showed the prototype on Instagram, I'm getting a pretty good deal on it too. So I can't complain.
Great stuff. Yeah, I'm happy for you. I think this figure definitely, at certain angles, I mean, they've really nailed Mark Hamill's likeness and stuff. couple angles, he looks a little bit off to me, but I think for the most part, can't get much better than that.
We got some other news, and actually, this was the only Marvel or Star Wars release in between. It seems to be kind of like we tend to have been recording about every 2 weeks or so, give or take, whenever our schedules match up. I mean, you and I are doing this for fun. Our first priorities are family and then our jobs, and this comes a distant third, but we still love doing it. A lot of the other stuff that we have going on, we actually have firsthand information of them because these are all figures that either you or I have on pre-order. And we did talk about it last episode that Hella was going to be coming out. And Chris, you have some information on that.
Yeah, I did. I got the final payment processing currently as we record today, and hopefully she'll be shipping by by the end of this week, getting her next week, and she's most likely going to be our next review figure. So that's a little tease of what's to come. But yeah, I'm really excited for that figure. Can't wait. We'll talk about her more this episode.
So another figure that we had a hunch and an inkling just based on some tremors in the Force and the Hot Toys collecting community that Thor from Infinity War looked like it was going to be coming early. Some of the dates got moved up, and then they got moved up significantly because it looks like this is also a figure that's going to be dropping here in the month of October. And originally that one was, I think, January to March. So talk about moving that one up a lot. And
it's crazy.
You know, some people are going to have this in hand this month, which is great. I know this, Chris, and in my talks with you, this is one you've had on a payment plan. I can't fault you one bit for just leaving it where you had originally scheduled. I mean, we've talked, this is our 6th episode. I feel like at least half the episodes we've talked about is being smart with budgets and stuff like that. So I actually commend you, my friend, for sticking to that and not falling into the hype.
Yeah, I thought about it. I got an offer from Sideshow saying that, hey, you could do a one-time payment on this and we shipping out shortly. And originally the payments were, I have 2 payments, so it's not, don't have to wait too long, but no, it's December and January. And I'm just going to stick to that because I mix it up with how I order my figures. I have more on payment plan than I do on one-time payment. So my Hella was on a one-time payment. My Deadpool was on a one-time payment. And then one of the next figures we're going to talk about, concept art Cap, I've got him on a one-time payment. So I kind of had to play it safe with the money. And yeah, I'm just going to wait. I'll see some of the collectors on the group are getting it this week or next.
So you mentioned it, Chris, with the concept art Captain America, and that was scheduled. It looked like it was going to be releasing here in October. I think the original time frame was October to December. I got the same notice you did. I actually have this one on I've had it on a payment plan. I've made a few payments towards it. I think I may have had it on either 3 or 4. And they had indicated to me that my final payment was going to be pushed out from October to November. Now, that doesn't mean the figure isn't going to be released this month, but it's something that you and I have been starting to kind of have some suspicions on the way that Sideshow has inventory. And it seems like they're more willing to put the people that have the pre-orders in with the one-time payments kind of the front of the line. I don't think it's necessarily like putting in your pre-order the first day means you're one of the first to get it. I don't know. That could be me purely speculating. So based on that information, it looks like he could be delayed. We'll have to see. And here, as listeners of our podcast, Chris and I will kind of keep our thumb on the pulse of what's going on with these. And as soon as we know, we'll share it with everybody. Also, another figure that I had on pre-order that figure we just talked about with Luke Skywalker, but his Jedi Exile from The Last Jedi also was scheduled to come out between October and December. This one has been pushed back to November as well. Disappointing, but I'm I usually take the stance, Chris, that I'm willing to wait for these. Like, if they need more time to get it right or they need more time to get the stock in, I don't think we've seen the Luke Skywalker at the Hong Kong secret base yet. So, at least in terms of it being readily available over in Hong Kong. So, to me, that means that's probably a little bit more of a legitimate delay. Whereas the concept art cap has basically been available since this summer. And a lot of people kind of already have it in hand overseas. We just haven't got it in here in North America yet.
It's nothing wrong with waiting, man. Nothing wrong at all.
Yeah, it just makes the anticipation even better. I think, Chris, the final news piece I wanted to talk about is the Neon Tech Iron Man exclusive from San Diego Comic-Con. It looks like they made some of those available at New York Comic-Con. And they did something interesting where they didn't have to haul all of their stock across the country from California to New York. Is they, for attendees at the con, they were giving away not reward cards. They were giving away codes with cards on them that basically you input that code onto their website and it gave you the chance to go in and order the figures. The first day or so, it looked like some of those people were getting them and putting them on eBay, selling, kind of almost selling the right to purchase a figure, not selling like the full figure, which I don't know if this is going to be the evolution of not necessarily scalping, but kind of the cost of going to these cons, if that's what is going to become a thing now. I don't think so. And on that first day, I saw some codes going for $25, $50. And I think by over the weekend, a lot of the other larger groups that we're in were having some people that were getting the codes and had no intention of ordering the figures. So they were putting them out on social media, putting them in other groups. People had that opportunity. To me, Chris, I feel like the fact that come towards the end of the weekend, like they weren't fulfilling all the orders that they had maybe expected, that I think maybe this week they may make that figure available for anybody to get a chance to get that if they want it on their sideshow site.
I have a feeling it's going to go that way too. It's an expensive figure, and I don't know. It's really cool, but it's a concept thing, so not necessarily something that a lot of people might gravitate towards. But anyway, we'll see how things go with that Neon Tech Iron Man.
So that's the news for episode 6. Chris, we'll shift gears now, talk about our collection update, and might be one of the more boring ones that we've done in our 6 episodes so far. A couple things, I just mentioned it, that I have the pre-order now for Luke Skywalker crate from Star Wars The Last Jedi. I won't rehash that whole conversation. But one thing we talk about often is just kind of changing things up. I actually, in between kind of the last episode, kind of was reevaluating my budget, crunching numbers. I mean, sometimes when I've got nothing to do, I'm just looking at my spreadsheet of anticipated purchases coming up, what I'm setting aside each month, and kind of fine-tuning things. And I think the thing is we put these pre-orders and stuff in, and it's sometimes a year out, and sometimes your focus changes, and sometimes it can change from day to day, week to week. I think one thing that we also talk about oftentimes is sometimes it's okay to like walk away from a pre-order, put down a non-refundable deposit sometimes. Just because you've put down $23, $25, $26 towards a figure, you don't want to be seen as losing money because you decide not to get something. However, if you stick to it and you have to pay then the full price of a figure that you might not want, and it might not be a popular one enough that you might not be able to turn around and even sell for, what you paid for, because you have to mark it up by 13% on eBay, sometimes it makes sense. So one thing, and even I know a couple episodes ago, you and I were both super excited about Shuri being released from Black Panther. That's when I had a pre-order on, and the more I thought about it, I said, well, Shuri's going to lead into Black Panther, and this is going to lead into things that I'm not necessarily ready to go with my Marvel focus. And I just said, all right, well, I'm just going to use that money for another figure coming up. And then boom, lo and behold, we got Luke Skywalker there.
Yeah, I know you and I were talking about it. It just, sometimes you have that random figure that doesn't quite feel like it fits in, and it looked like sure it was going to be that for you. And it's nothing. I know that you love that character and everything, but just because we love a character doesn't mean we need to have the figure of it. So yeah, no, it's we live and learn, man. We'll talk about it a little bit more here.
I talked about shifting some budget stuff around, just kind of tightening some things up. Not super exciting. What I know, Chris, that you haven't really added anything. I know you're holding firm. You've got quite a bit of figures on the way, so your collecting update's going to be pretty more exciting in the coming weeks and months
Sure.
here. But what else you got going on?
I've still got that $20 off coupon that came with Black Widow from Infinity War. And as of today's date, I got another 10 days of it being valid. So I've got all the figures basically on pre order that I really want that are available right now. I'm kind of getting that feeling that I kind of feel like I need to get something because I don't want to lose that $20. But then again, if in the next 10 days nothing pops out, Marvel wise, new releases, kind of might just let that thing expire. Kind of stinks, but it is what it is. I was kind of looking at the Star Wars figures and like, oh, that Boba Fett looks pretty sweet. And,
Don't do it,
I
Chris.
know. And our buddy Jared Chilson, Mayfex Mando, just got his. And I'm like, nope, nope, nope. I've got enough vintage Kenner Boba Fett stuff that I don't need to spend that on the Hot Toys one. But anyway, it's just one of those things. You just got to kind of figure out what really works for us in our own collections.
One of the topics that we kind of wanted to cover, and this is kind of broad range, it's not like anything particularly focused about this topic, which kind of funny because that's really what we want to kind of talk about. We talk about it often, and I just mentioned it. It's okay sometimes to walk away from a figure. The day that you did the pre-order could be different how you feel a couple months down the line. And yes, a non-refundable deposit is tough to walk away from, but it's easier to walk away from that than it is the full cost of a figure that you might not really want to have in your collection. And we've talked about it on a few episodes. It can be difficult to sell a hot toy. I mean, not all of these are going to be Iron Man Mark 47 or a lot of the die-cast stuff that's out there that's holding value, and if not fetching more than retail. I mean, you look all the time, and there's some of them that people are just kind of trying to break even on. Even I even ran some numbers too to say, like, okay, for some of the figures, if you were to purchase it wholesale from, excuse me, not wholesale, if you were to purchase it directly from Sideshow, and then you were able to factor in your own shipping costs that you have to cover, then you have that as your price. And for some of the figures, it's like $250 or so sometimes when you factor in the shipping, and they don't give you the shipping when you're ordering the figure on there, which I thought was funny. I actually had to throw that into my budget because I wasn't factoring in shipping, which drastically changed my forecast for the rest of this year into next. But you figure, okay, we'll even break even on what you paid for the figure and then shipping. And if you're going to happen to sell it on eBay and you have to factor in PayPal fees and eBay fees, it's 13%. And you tack that up, and you're looking at like over $280 sometimes for a figure. Not many people are going to pay $280 for a standard release figure unless they've got one of those eBay coupons.
Yeah, it's crazy when you break down the numbers like that. You really get a sense of where you need to be dollar wise. Because if you're not factoring in how much you paid for shipping, just what the figure costs, and then, oh, wow, I got the exact same amount that I paid. And then it's like, wait a second. Like, I didn't get, I have to factor in all the eBay stuff. And I sell stuff on eBay all the time. So I know I always have to keep things in check because I know how much the eBay and PayPal fees are going to be. And yeah, you gotta be smart with some of those purchases. And most of the figures that I got were less than they were retail, and they were brand spanking new. So people, I mean, I wasn't asking them, where they came from, but it's just sometimes people buy these figures and they don't open them and they stick them in a closet. And then, I mean, I bought some figures that were $40, $50 less than they were retail, and the figure was brand new. I don't want to be that person losing that much money on the figure if I decide to change it out. I would rather I'd rather if I did pre-order it, I'd rather take that hit just canceling the pre-order, honestly.
Yeah, our friend Bill Dranowski of the Dorkler podcast, who is, if you're not listening to that, it's a fantastic podcast. I know a lot of our listeners also are listeners of the Dorkler, and I helped Bill get that podcast up and running. And now those guys are doing a great job focusing on the 12th scale mostly. We're looking at the 6th scale for Hot Toys here. He is the master of buying and selling, but really using it as a means of trading. And it's we've talked about it. I feel like we've talked about it before. You see sometimes on groups that people want to trade figures, trade this for that, and usually they just don't have any self-awareness and realize that what they're looking to do is nobody in their right mind is actually going to make that trade. But it's a lot easier to sell a figure and then turn around and buy one with the kind of the proceeds there, because then you kind of are in the driver's seat on the terms of what's going to happen. And I've never done a trade before. I don't think I have the aptitude for it. I'm by nature a not very trusting person, and I just wouldn't trust it to go right. At least if I've got money in hand and PayPal's involved, and if something goes south, you can kind of, recoup yourself. And I don't know. I would rather buy and sell to do that trading. And we've talked about it. I mean, there's been a few figures that ever since we started this podcast a couple months ago, I've changed out some figures, and it's okay. I mean, sometimes, like for the perfect example, what you just mentioned with Suri, I love that character, but I just don't feel like it would for what I have for displays, and I have to be very aware of like what I want to be able to display, because I've only got 4 IKEA Detox like in the office space I have. I don't think I could fit in a 5th. And I think if I fit in a 5th, I'm pretty sure my wife would kill me. And besides the point, it's just like, so if that's going to be all I'm ever going to have, I'm probably going to get to the point, and if I'm still doing this several years from now, which I hope I am, I love the line. I hope they still make them, but I may have to kind of either put some away in storage or choose what I want to display. And I think it's better to make those kind of decisions now. I know that you've gone through recently. You've done some action figure therapy and gotten rid of a lot of stuff, Chris, at some recent toy shows and stuff. And you just got to let it go. I mean, if you have it stored away if you don't have the ever intention of like doing anything with it or reselling for, just stuff doesn't make the money that like vintage stuff does. I think the reason why vintage still commands top dollar on some things is because there's a finite number of the things available, and they were only made, and people beat the heck out of their toys and they played with them and they enjoyed them. So the ones that are in really good condition, they're hard to come by. And as cool as Hot Toys are, they're not super scarce. I mean, if you want a figure, you can get one as long as you're willing to pay the money that's there. Very rarely when something comes out and it's a pre-order and it's not like an exclusive there, if you want it, you can get it. And I think that's what I love about the line is I don't have to sit there worrying like, I don't know if I'm going to get this figure or not. I'm ordering the first day. If you wait a year, then yeah, maybe you might miss out, but I don't know. So
No, I'm
I feel
just
like
thinking.
I'm ranting here.
No, just a little bit. No, I'm just kidding. It's a great point. I think for me, really, we talked about it before I really started getting into Hot Toys, and I just said, I'm sticking to Marvel. I'm just doing it. And I'm going to stick to the figures that I just really like. I'm not going to just buy things to buy things. I mean, that's how I used to be with Star Wars stuff. I would just buy it to buy it because it's Star Wars. And I've really come to the conclusion over the last couple of years that I can't do that anymore. My basement was just filled with stuff and all this action figure therapy, to quote the guys at the Sandcrawler podcast. It's really it's been a great thing for me to go through, and I've been able to really just let go of things and using that money pretty much, just make this point, pretty much every figure that I've gotten has either been from has been from me selling stuff, selling my collection. And I've got 20 20 Marvel Hot Toys in hand currently. So there might be some overtime, money used for a couple of them, but in all honesty, it's basically trading out all that stuff that had been sitting in totes for years and years for all these Hot Toys. That's just been my experience so far, and that's the only reason I've been able to accumulate the number of Hot Toys that I have in a relatively short period of time. I mean, we're talking 10 months, so that's basically two figures a month. I mean, that's not I'm not keeping up with that at that rate by any means, but it's just worked out that way so far. So yeah, I mean, it's all about basically just figuring out what you really want. Don't just buy things to buy things. I mean, I know there's a few people I've seen on the groups, like they'll buy two of a figure and then they'll, one for the collection and then one to trade. And one of the trades that I saw fairly recently, a guy traded an unopened Yondu Deluxe for an unopened Mark 47 Iron Man straight up to somebody. And I'm like, why would that person make that trade? Because I mean, Yondu's an awesome figure. He's still sitting on my wait list. I'm getting very doubtful that that's going to get fulfilled, but I'm just going to leave it on there. But I mean, that Mark 47, we keep bringing it up. It's like a figure that commands almost three times what retail was. Yeah, that worked out for the guy with the Yondu, but if the other guy had done his research, he could have sold it and then bought Yondu and then bought maybe two other figures. So, but anyway, I mean, and you're not the only one that's walked away from a deposit. I did it right off the bat. I had pre-ordered Gladiator Thor because I really wanted a Thor figure, and then the Infinity War Thor came out, and I thought about it for like a day, and I was like, nope, that Gladiator Thor is too specific for me for a version of a figure. That's why I want a Hulk figure, but I'm not going to go for the Gladiator Hulk because it's just too specific. I like the figures that can be set up in multiple scenarios so I can constantly, my plan is to be able to constantly switch things up and change things up, and I feel like I would just have to keep those two figures always together. I mean, that's in my own head. I can do whatever we want, but so I walked away from that deposit. I'm pretty sure you did too,
Yeah, I've
right?
walked away from three. I've now have walked away. I had the same one. I had Gladiator Thor. I originally had Black Panther on pre-order well before we knew Surrey was going to come out. I had walked away from that. I actually had, you probably remember this. I was actually reconsidering adding him because
Yeah.
of Surrey, and then I'm like, you know what? That's
Yeah, I
that's
said
that's
no.
bad logic here. I'm like to spend more money just to justify another purchase, and I'm like,
Right.
the prudent thing to do here is, as much as I love the movie Black Panther and I think it's phenomenal, I can really like the movie and not necessarily make sure that I have to have figures from that. And I think that's kind of my new motto going forward, at least especially with Marvel, because I've put more into Star Wars lately, and that's really what I was going to start out doing only. And then I got into Captain America as a focus, and then I got into Black Panther, Black Widow as a focus, and then so, I mean, really, right now, I mean, basically, my Marvel collection is I've got a lot of the Captain America -1. I've got now all the Black Widow -1. I've got both Spider-Man MCU releases, and I have the Iron Man Mark 6, and that's kind of my Marvel collection now. So, I'm just gonna be super selective of what I had there. I'll still love the movies, but I think Star Wars is where I'm going to go. And I think also to think about our podcast going forward too. I think it might actually work better if I'm more focused on the Star Wars stuff and you're more focused on the Marvel stuff. And I think that'll give some, diversity to the show. I've actually had a few people, just kind of a quick aside before we jump into our feature figure review, is sometimes people are like, well, I'm not necessarily a Marvel guy. I know I was talking to our friend Jim Roberge, and he's like, I saw you guys reviewed the Black Widow figure, and he's like, I'm not a big Marvel guy, but he's like, I did listen to it eventually, and he's like, you guys were talking a lot about the other stuff, and he's like, I'm glad I didn't not listen to it for that one reason. I think that's why we don't ever overemphasize our featured review figure, because it's really only about 5 to 10 minutes of the entire podcast.
I know. I feel like sometimes people might be skipping an episode here or there just because of the feature figure. I mean, we really do that just for fun, and it's always going to be a figure that we have in hand, one of us anyway, and it's just fun to break down a figure, and it kind of gets us going because it gets you thinking, gets you thinking about other figures that may have similar characteristics or quality and that sort of thing, and it might help you steer things in different directions.
Let's shift gears and we'll move over to our featured figure review. And I said there'll be a story here. So as I mentioned at the top of the episode today, well, I don't know if it's technically yesterday or today or the day after, but just conveniently, I'm just going to call it my 1 year, because I know when I had ordered the figure on eBay and I don't remember approximately when it arrived, because tracking doesn't go back that far at this point. But our feature figure review is the Shore Trooper MMS 389 from Rogue One, A Star Wars Story. Now, this is, as I've mentioned before on other podcasts before, and I don't know if I've really gotten into depth on our podcast here, but the Shore Trooper is my favorite, air quotes, trooper in, the Star Wars universe. The second I saw it, I just instantly loved the design, the aesthetic, the colors, and in the movie. And you and I, Chris, are huge fans of Rogue One, and I just love everything about it. And I hope it shows up again in another movie or not. But if it doesn't, I've still got my figure in hand here. And I also, not just Hot Toys, I've got pretty much any version that I can think of that they've made a version. There's only a few out there that I don't have. I think I don't have the Kotobukiya figures. I keep waiting for a deal on that. I think I have all the Hasbro releases. I have the model kit, the SH Figuarts. Trying to think a lot of the other, the Lego version. I've got one of the Gentle Giant figures. I think there's 2 other Gentle Giant figures I don't have. So anyways, long story short, I like the figure quite a bit, and why I felt like we would have covered this figure at some point, but I felt like, Chris, it was fitting because this was my first Hot Toy. This is what started it all. This time last year, within a day or two of getting this figure, is when I went out and pre-ordered Jedi Luke Skywalker. I pre-ordered Rey from The Last Jedi, and that kicked off things of me ending up with 4 DTOFs full of figures and more to come. And it ignited this passion that I didn't even know was there. And collecting just was different after that day last year.
That's awesome. Yeah, I know. I remember you talking about jumping on the Hot Toys train and how you were, I mean, we all knew you were a huge Shore Trooper fan. And when you got you were sending pictures and like the group messages and stuff like that, I just couldn't believe the detail in that figure. And that's what really started getting me thinking, and your love of the figure and getting into the line and stuff like that. You just never know. You never know what could point you in a different direction. And this figure definitely, I can see why. I can see why it got things rolling Hot Toys wise.
Yeah, I mean, I still remember that day pretty vividly. I remember getting the delivery from post office that day and in the big box and opening it. And I just remember at the time, like, I didn't know what to expect. I knew that they were super detailed, and little did I know that a lot of the photos that you see on Sideshow on the Hot Toys corporate site and stuff, like those are real images. Those aren't movie things. So when I saw some of those, I'm like, nah, it can't look like that. That would be impossible. And the box, and I open the box, I'm like, wow, this is just something else. I mean, and the size of the box too. I'm like, wow, this is going to be a lot cooler than I thought. I remember, and the Star Wars boxes are relatively basic. I mean, they're just the black and gray box with a picture of the figure on the front. And then, at least with the Rogue Ones, they kind of had like the cigar label of the name of the figure down on the bottom, which I think was a nice touch. And you open that up, and then there's the really vibrant image on the undercover of that before you pick up that kind of trifold cardboard insert, and then there's the figure sitting right there, and it just eye popping. And you've got obviously the clear plastic protecting it there, but you're looking through it and you're like, wow. And it felt like this just religious experience, like this can't be real. Like, this isn't an action figure, this isn't a collectible. And you're just opening out. I remember pulling my hand, and Chris, you mentioned it, like that detail. I'm like, this is impossible. Like this, like, I don't know. It's still, and it's sitting right in front of me here at my podcasting desk here. And I still can't believe the level of detail. And then, as we talked about it, it kind of it kicked things off. And I said, well, if this figure's this good, the human sculpted faces must be even better. And when I started getting those in hand and time, obviously this is a helmeted trooper, the deco and everything on the armor and the weathering, everything is just second to none. And get the figures in hand that have the face print, the face painting, and the eyes are just so lifelike. And I'm just like, it's just like, okay, well, I need to sell anything else I have. I'm going all in on this line.
Yeah. It's amazing, these figures, what they do to you. For me, like, again, I've said it in the past, like, I never thought I would go this route collecting wise, but honestly, I didn't know what they were like in hand. And with you saying all that stuff, once you had it in hand, it just really is like, this is just next level kind of collecting. And I think it's the price point that's a hard pill to swallow initially, these figures. But then once you get in hand and you can see the amount of detail and time and effort that was put into designing these figures, that 99% of the time, like, it's well worth it, these figures. And I'm looking at the pictures. I went through the Hot Toys checklist on Brick City Blockade and found MMS
389.
Yeah, 389. Scroll down the list because it's all in numerical order. Thank you very much, Brian Fontaine. It's great, man. All the images, the promo images that they had when the figure was available. Man, yeah, I've seen it in person at your place, but I mean, I got to check that thing out again.
So this one originally retailed, believe it or not, Chris, for $204.99, which
wow,
originally announced on. So I found some. This is well before, obviously, we started collecting, and I remember this was when I was still in full blown, like, over the top for Shore Troopers. I remember seeing a release for this, and I'm like, wow. But then I'm like, wow, that's out of my price point for what I was doing at the time. Because at the time I was just collecting like Hasbro Black Series and anything else Hasbro related. It was originally announced on September 26, 2016. It began shipping in North America in April 2017. So a couple months after Rogue One had been out. It is the 47th Star Wars figure released, and it was one of 15 produced from Rogue One. Rogue One's got actually some pretty decent love from Hot Toys, and which is good to see. And there's still several characters that they need to come out and do. They got to do Krennic, and they have to do Baze, and they have to do Cassian, and there's a couple others I feel like they could also do too.
Yeah, they should do some of the commandos on Scarif to go with your Scarif trooper.
There you go. That's another one of our two loves here combined into one.
Yeah.
And this although Hot Toys calls it, the Shore Trooper, this is the Shore Trooper Captain because I'm an aficionado about those. There's the, just the standard grunt, which looks a lot like this, just doesn't have the blue deco on it. And there's the squad leader, which kind of has the comma, very similar to, visualize what like Captain Rex had in Clone Wars around their waist. And that kind of signified squad leader for the three different ranks of the Shore Trooper armor. Just super iconic, I think, at this point. I mean, I'm not the only one that feels that way. So at least that gives me a little bit of, I'm not out on an island for these. But so speaking of paying, and I know that there's been this is a figure that has just absolutely skyrocketed because I feel like people didn't give it this is an underrated figure. I feel like it wasn't as produced because I don't feel like it was pre-ordered as much. And because when people like me started getting it in hand and were raving about it, that just the supply wasn't necessarily there. So back 1 year ago on eBay, I paid $289.99 for this shipped. So obviously that's a mark of the originally like 204 that it was, or 205, excuse me. Chris, looking at recent eBay sales within the last 2 to 3 weeks from the recording of this, the average price of this figure is $370.
Holy cow. That's a crazy jump for that
Yeah,
figure.
and I mean, a lot of them over actually 400, and there was one that was, I think, sold for 300, and I think it may have been used. I didn't really split between used and new because for a lot of times people care so much for Hot Toys, even a used one is practically new. I could sell any of the figures out of my collection, even if I'm the original owner. They're practically new because I treat them as nice as I do. So, that's one thing too that a lot of people would love to be able to add this figure to their collection. But as much as I love it, this one doesn't come with like a ton of accessories, and that's a significant amount. I mean, that's almost, for some of the basic figures, that's almost 2 figures that you're giving up the opportunity to get just to get this one. So I'm actually really happy, even though I paid way more than retail 6 months after it was released. I'm okay with that. Sometimes at the time it can seem like a air quotes bad deal, but as time goes on for some of these that are just underrated, they jump, and then there's the demand there that there's not the supply to meet it.
Another reason why we talk about deciding to jump on a figure that you really want initially. But
Yeah, if you really want it and you love it, go for the pre-order. I mean, you can always cancel the pre-order later if you change your mind, but for some of these, and you and I have not been able to crack this egg. I mean, we're only, I'm a year in, you're coming up on, you said about 10 months or so. We don't know if, Hot Toys uses these, initial pre-order numbers to figure out like what's the run of the figures going to be. I mean, if they were smart, and I anticipate that they are, that would factor pretty heavily into how many they're going to make. I mean, they're not going to make thousands of a figure if they're only anticipating being able to sell a couple hundred of them. I think that's why they've gotten into trouble with so many of the first order figures. I think if you look at what they've done since the Force Awakens, the troopers that they've released are very specialized in the really kind of the unique ones from each film now, and they're not releasing like several versions of the first order trooper like they did, because Sideshow can still not give away all those figures that they've got.
Yeah, it's funny that you mentioned that. I didn't realize, that point. But yeah, all the troopers that have come out for Solo, and I don't know if did any come out for Last Jedi. Oh yeah,
they did the Praetorian.
Yeah. And then like with Rogue One, the Death Troopers and stuff like that. So yeah, good point.
So just let's talk finally about the figure here, because they were, it just needed a insanely big backstory. Just because this is going to be one of those supersized episodes that we have. This is going to take a lot of the editing, the editing room floor on this one to make us sound better than we are. Yeah. So this one, obviously, going off the the Sideshow site, we don't pretend to know all the points of articulation. It says there's 30. I trust them. This one had 6 hands. Obviously, the highly decoed armor that it had, the pants are kind of like the canvas material. I mean, it literally is that, and just all the details on this. The E-22 blaster rifle that the shore trooper captain carries has got great deco on it. It's perfectly in scale. It even has the shoulder strap for it. Other than that, there's not much to it, but you know what? It works. The vibrant colors of blue and the orange and stuff on the figure, extremely well weathered. I still can't get over how well the armor on this one looks, and obviously it's that that lived-in universe for these troopers on Scarif. They gave it enough of a backstory that it kind of makes sense. But on the other hand, how effective is a squad of troopers that are there to protect the base that nobody can really get into because of the shield generator anyways? But you know what? We'll leave that part to our imagination.
Oops, that's kind of a
Yeah, and it's funny because like some of the canon stuff, actually, it's like a lot of the stormtroopers start out as like shore troopers, and that's how they like eventually, rise up the ranks if they can handle all the boredom of being on Scarif. And I feel like one of the characters in Inferno Squad started out as a shore trooper, and I think it was Del Miko. I think
I think that's right.
Was a shore trooper. So I mean, I just made me love that character even more from that the Inferno Squad novel, and the then Battlefront 2 video game that followed from that. And I don't know. I could rave about this figure, all day long. If it wasn't one of my focus collections, I'd still love it. I mean, the armor, there's a couple things that people that to be wary of. I think the forearm armor kind of comes down to the wrist sometimes, so it can be a little bit difficult to change out the hands if you just do decide to do that. Got him in a very relaxed pose, kind of not shouldering the rifle, but holding the rifle down, and quite a bit of things that you can do with the figures. And yeah, I mean, just absolutely love this one. It's it's always going to have a special place in my collection because it was the first one, but we talk about like what are some of our favorite things in our collection. I mean, it's always going to be in my top 5 just because of the nostalgia of that. But I think literally, in seeing a lot of the other troopers that Hot Toys has produced, I would still, for the ones that I've seen and the ones that have been released, I still think it's probably in that top 5.
Oh, for sure. It's kind of got that next level deco like you were talking about compared to a lot of other troopers that have come out. One other thing I wanted to mention was, so in all the promo photographs, so there's other versions of this figure. Did you ever see if there was any news about that, if they were ever teased anywhere?
I think somebody had at some point, I feel like they had the grunt. I don't know if they've done the squad leader. I think they have displayed them in the past, but obviously I don't know if they would go back and do it. I mean, especially now that this one's been out. They were producing these at the end of 2016 into 2017. Right now we're at the tail end of 2018 into 2019. Are they really going to come back and redo this trooper? A lot of people like us love Rogue One, and I feel like these would sell well, and it's kind of a different way to kind of do a reissue of a figure that's highly desirable. So obviously, the absolute second that they decide that they're going to do the squad leader or the grunt, the standard version, yeah, day one pre-order, baby. But if they don't, I'm perfectly okay with this being the shore trooper that they do. I mean, I'll always know that this is the captain. They did have the promo images there, and who knows? Hot Toys has done some different things in the past, and they're kind of coming back now to the prequels and coming back and looking at doing a lot of figures from Empire Strikes Back. So is it out of the question that they do that? They've been making the Star Wars figures. They did the Luke Skywalker DX7, I think it was in 2012, and then Han Solo, Chewbacca, Obi-Wan, those were all kind of in 2014. So when you think about it, I want to say Crate Luke and Bespin Leia, I think, are figures like 101 and 102 that they've released. To put things into perspective, and obviously the other line that we cover with Marvel, they've got over 200 at this point. So Star Wars is definitely lagging behind in terms of what they've produced, and there's far fewer movies, funny to say that for Star Wars, it's been out for 40 years versus the 20 films that are out for the MCU. So there's over time they will fill in some of those gaps, and especially now where we have a gap until next December where we're going to get another saga film with Episode 9. They definitely have some time here to kind of fill in some of those gaps.
Yeah, again, it'll be really interesting to see what figures they choose to put out, and I'm curious if Hot Toys, the people that run the company, if they do any research on some of these figures that command big money on the secondary market, if doing an exclusive version release or something like that would be in their best interest to do so, to capitalize on that money that's going towards people on the secondary market. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see how things go as far as figure releases.
So in terms of review, obviously, I don't know. What do you want to do for a review system this week, Chris? I'll let you decide.
Let's see how many reactors are being used on the Death Star to blow up Scarif.
All right, so I'm going 4 out of 4 reactors to blow up Scarif because unfortunately these troopers do not exist now in canon because of that, or most of them, anyways. There's a few of them got out, like Delmico and stuff. But yeah, anyways, this one's got a perfect score for me. There's some faults, like I mentioned, about like the forearm armor and whatnot. But to me, it was the first figure I had. I got it. It launched a love of the line, and one of the reasons why we have a podcast that we're talking about here is because of the Shore Trooper figure. So all of our listeners, you can thank the Shore Trooper for there being a 6 Scale Scavengers podcast out there. So, Chris, the supersized episode that's going to take me a million years to edit to make us sound better than we really are, with all the ums and ahs and all that stuff taken out for the most part. So it's a little bit easier on our listeners' ears. But, Chris, I think it's that time. Let's go to plug time. Where can the people find you on social media?
Yeah, people can find me on Twitter and Instagram at Vintage Viewport.
And you can follow me on Twitter and Instagram at Jedi Scavenger SW. Make sure you head over to Instagram and follow 6 Scale Scavengers. Chris and I are very kind of infrequent posters over there, but that's probably one of the best places to get news about what's coming up and what figures are out and what episodes are out and when you can listen to it. Also mention, a plug for the Facebook private group that we have, 6 Scale Scavengers, and it's a very small community, but very, very active. And, it's one of the daily highlights to be able to see, what's out there and what's getting posted, and has led to the last couple episodes. Some of the topics that we've talked about has come from that community. So we want to thank everybody that has joined up, and certainly we'd love to have more people along the journey that we're on here. For me, just the first year in, hopefully the first year of many. It's just something that we love doing here.
Yeah, man, absolutely. Let's keep this thing rolling here.
Yeah, and obviously you're listening to podcasts now, but if you have any friends that you think would also enjoy listening to it and you want to tell them where to find it, it'd be on Apple Podcasts, Google Play. I fixed the glitch in the Matrix, Chris, to find out we were not actually on Spotify, but we are now. We're also on Stitcher, and you can find the RSS feed directly at 6scalescavengers.libsyn.com. We are part of the Brick City Blockade podcast network, and I recently made an appearance on Resistance Recap with Robin Vogt and Scott Inch, breaking down the Star Wars Resistance animated show that just released. We talked about it at the top. So just, again, super thankful for everybody that's been tuning in. This is something that Chris and I are very passionate about, and the fact that we have our listeners out there that enjoy our inherent ramblings about our collecting journey is just super cool. So thank you for that.
Thank you, everyone.
And Chris, as we always say, may the Force be with you.
Always.